Good evening. Welcome to the Bennington Select Board meeting. I just looked at April 24th. I'm sorry. I got the right agenda. May 8th meeting. We're at the Firehouse, and we're going to come to order. I'm Tom Jacobs, and I think probably before we get started, we could introduce ourselves, maybe starting down here with Chad.
Good evening, Chad Gordon.
Hello, I'm Jeannie Jenkins.
Good evening, I'm Donald Campbell.
Good evening, I'm Jim Carroll.
Good evening, I'm Carson Thurber.
And I'm Jean Connor.
Great, and Stu Hurd is right behind us doing some kind of a special function. One of the things that Stu was doing was checking to see if we had sign-ins and the like for our meeting, that we might have folks that are interested in talking with us during citizens at comment period, and it's an opportunity for a sign-in, and we'll have that available. And even before we get started, I'll just suggest the reason for that is so that when we have the citizens comment opportunity, we'll know who's coming, where they're from, what their potential topic might be, and also how we can get back to them if there's an open issue that we can't resolve during that period of time. And the purpose of that is to make sure that citizens have their right to be heard and the right to speak to items that are not already on the agenda. We want the citizens to recognize that they have that right and opportunity, that we recognize and want to make sure that they have that benefit. At the same time, we want those folks that address us to give us the respect that we deserve and as they are going to receive. And therefore, questions or allegations or comments directed towards anyone on the select board, any third party that are inappropriate, we'll have to limit that because that's not why we're here gathered today to do business. So the hope is that we have full opportunity for discussion for those items that are not already on the agenda, because they might lead to a future agenda item, and it'll give us sort of a heads up and we can be prepared. So that's the purpose of the sign up. Any other comments, Vice Chair Campbell, might want to make?
Well, I think you mentioned it, but just we would like to try to collect phone numbers from people that speak so that, as you mentioned, we have a chance either ourselves or to find the appropriate party that could get back to citizens. It's not always possible to answer every question in real time, and we hope that that will give more thorough follow-up.
We don't want anyone to feel that they were left out, at least the opportunity to raise an issue that's not already on the agenda. And we feel that that's our responsibility, not only to hear, but to respond. Have in mind that response does not always mean immediate within the context of the hour or two, but we do want the folks that come and are taking their time to visit with us. And also you'll notice that we've got rid of the dais, the lectern. We don't feel that you need to be like you're in church or you're in court. We've got a little table there. We had 2 chairs at our same level. It's more convenient for you, the members of the community that might want to be speaking with us, and also for us just to have a conversation rather than this way or that way. But if anyone has recommendations on making that even more comfortable for our citizens, don't hesitate to share that with us. Without further ado, if we could just stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance. Donald, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do have a couple of items on the consent agenda. The items are the minutes of April 24th and the warrants, and also a liquor license application. Is there any motion that anyone would like to offer for the consent agenda?
I'd make a motion for A, B, and C on the agenda. Yeah.
Okay. There's also a proclamation that we're going to talk about separately, if that's okay. All in favor of the minutes, warrants, and
You want a second? I'll second it.
good, thank you. So recognized, so noted. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
That's 7 in favor.
Tom, I'm going to circulate the liquor license application for your signatures. There are 2 actual applications because it's a first, second class, and restaurant license, so you have to sign twice.
And the most important thing is for Chad at the end of the table to make sure he gets it back to you so we don't have to vote again.
No pressure, Chad.
That's it. Because that's happened before.
I used to sit there.
Yeah. So you get a call tomorrow from someone in the business world saying they never got their license, it's all because of Donald, now it's Chad's fault.
Was Donald the culprit in collecting?
No, but it's easy
No one's
to blame
taking
him.
any.
It was difficult to ascertain.
The next thing, we have a couple of proclamations tonight, but I thought maybe we could do is, before we deal with the proclamations, go into the citizens' comment period and hear from citizens that might want to speak with us, and we'll go from there, if that makes sense.
We had no citizens sign up.
Okay. There are no citizens that have signed up, but that doesn't mean, because this is all new for everyone, if there's someone that doesn't want to speak with us for that period of time that we've allocated, 15 minutes, feel free to come up and tell us what you'd like to talk about. If not, we'll go right into the proclamation, and I think the first one that we're going to deal with deals with the Emergency Services Week. Folks from the Emergency Service Organization here tonight? Great. Forrest, could you come up with yourself and any representatives, the president of your board maybe, or whoever?
Don't be scared, guys. It's TV.
All right. Keep on coming.
Gotta sit down.
We got more chairs if you feel like.
Yeah, they can stand. Sorry, you guys. You guys didn't know you were going to be front and center, did you?
Yeah.
Sure, just the same. So with me tonight, I have Brian Pete is the chairman of our board. We have Jeff Wheeler, who's an AEMT with us. Bill Camarda, who's a critical care paramedic, also our director of operations. Craig Bowman is a lieutenant and AEMT with us. Mike Walzak is an EMT and currently in paramedic school for us, so we'll be a paramedic in the Bennington area here in the next year or so. And Captain Philip Kilpatrick, who's around the shift tonight.
Great. Is there anyone back at the bay? The base?
I'm not sure. Oh, and Charles Putnam is one of our AEMTs. He's hiding out in the back.
Great. We do want to recognize this week, and if I could turn to the vice chair, Donald, if you could read a proclamation that we hear.
All right, so this is for you gentlemen and for all of our community. Whereas emergency medical services are a vital public service, and whereas the members of the emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine, and whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now therefore, we, the Bennington Select Board, do hereby proclaim the week of May 21st through 27th, 2017 as Emergency Medical Services Week, and encourage the community to observe this week with thanks to those who are always there in our time of need. Dated at Bennington, Vermont, this 8th day of May, 2017.
Thank you, Donald. Is there a motion to accept the proclamation as read? Recognize the motion. Second?
Second?
We have a second. All in favor of the proclamation as read, signify by aye. Aye. That is unanimous. What we'll do is sign it, and we would like to present it to you, Forrest.
Sure.
If you could, before you
Be
leave.
great. Thank
We didn't
you.
bring the camera tonight, did we? We want to thank you for your loyal efforts. They're above and beyond in the grand scheme of things. You know, not too many years ago, this squad was totally volunteer service by folks that just had an interest in helping folks. That's the same today, hasn't really changed. The volunteer part has probably been impacted a bit. But now the services that you bring are with quality education and experience that we're probably one of the best in the state, if not the best.
We like to think so.
We appreciate that, and anything that we can do to make your lives interesting and helpful to us, because you make our lives interesting and helpful on those needed occasions. So I've got the proclamation, and I'll deliver it over if we got a signature or two.
Well, from everybody at Bennington Rescue, we appreciate all of the support of the Select Board, the citizens of the town that voted for us this last year, the town administration. Everybody's been phenomenal to work with. We like to be a partnership in this town, in this region, be a true asset for emergency medical care. We hope that you never need us, but if we have to be there, we hope to be the best part of your worst day. So that's just my 2 cents. Just because I have the floor real quickly, during EMS week, I'll let you guys and Banner, Cat TV, make sure you guys know, May 22nd at 11 o'clock at our headquarters on McKinley Street, we have a special announcement of some really awesome news that will be unveiled at that point in time about some really awesome patient care initiatives that we have going on. So invite all of you and anyone else that would like to come for that announcement.
You're a tease.
May 22nd
What time?
at 11 a.m.
That is a tease.
Just so happens that we happen to have another interesting discussion and a proclamation. Michael, would you like to lead us into that discussion?
As a prelude to the proclamation that Tom is referencing, I'm very pleased this evening to, on behalf of the board, welcome 3 people who have been working incredibly hard on behalf of this community, and in particular in conjunction with Youth Appreciation Day, which will be conducted at Willow Park on May 20th. The town is proud to be a partner in that process with many other institutions and organizations and individuals within the community. I will let the coordinators of the event fill you in detail on that and other things that they've been involved in. Then I'm sure that they will welcome the proclamation that they will be receiving tonight. I'd like to introduce the 3. Elise Ballarge, an AmeriCorps Vista person at BCRC. Rachel Newton, an AmeriCorps Vista person at Southwest Vermont Medical Center. And Rebecca Raymond, AmeriCorps Vista at the Alliance for Community Transformation. Ladies, would you like to come up, please?
So just before we start, we do have a few handouts for you guys.
Great, thank you. Thanks for bringing your chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's good. Thanks.
All right, so like Mike said, we're all AmeriCorps Vistas here in Bennington, and I'm Elise.
I'm Rebecca. And I'm Rachel.
Thanks.
and we're here to talk about Youth Appreciation Day, which is an event that was created to celebrate the youth in the community and all that they do to help Bennington. This is the 5th year that it's happening, and we're hoping to have a larger crowd this year. The event is free for all ages with activities like free food, raffle prizes, and live music that will be happening throughout the event.
Yeah, and as Mike said, just to reiterate, the event is happening May 20th from 12 to 4 at Upper Willow Park. And I know, so since, like Rebecca said, this is the 5th year that Youth Appreciation Day is happening, and we've tried to do a lot to grow it under our coordination this year. One of the things that we've done is we've more than doubled the number of booths and activities that they've had last year. So we have, as of right now, over 20 different organizations in town who are going to be coming and doing various things from hula hooping to bubbles to jump rope contests, all kinds of things that are good for various ages. We also, for the first time, are going to have the musical acts be kids from high school and middle school bands. So it's local bands, but it's also kids, so they get the opportunity to play, and they've all been practicing really hard. We've also, as Rebecca said, are expecting our biggest crowd yet, and we're expecting that because we've increased our marketing a ton. I don't know if you've seen around town, we have some of our yard signs up, and we have some more coming up, so expect to see them everywhere. We also have flyers hanging around town. And in the past, a lot of the youth who have been attending have been elementary school and preschool age. And so this year, in order to get more high school and middle school age kids, we've done some tabling events at the middle school, and the Youth Ambassador program through ACT went to some of the senior seminar classes at the high school and handed out surveys. We've also worked really hard to create sponsorship recognition levels, because we know that in the past, because it's new people coming in every year and planning it every year, trying to reinvent the wheel, that sometimes it's hard to remember everyone who's helped, and so we've created a way to make sure that everyone is fairly recognized for what they've done for us. We've also been working with TAM this year to help with our garbage collection, so it's not all on the town to help us with that. And this year, one of the biggest things that we're the most proud of doing is getting partners in this event. So, like I said earlier, Vistas are new people every year, so the 3 people who were sitting in these seats last year are different than they are this year. And that can make it really hard to plan an event of this scale, especially when you're new to the community and you don't have any connections. And so this year we've partnered with ACT, the Alliance for Community Transformations, United Ways of Bennington, Vermont, and the town to help us put this event together. And hopefully those are people, or rather groups, that can be partners into the future, so that this doesn't have to be something that's run by Vistas, but rather it's an effort that's aided by the Vistas, and we can help build capacity, but won't necessarily be the ones making the connections in town, because they're already made by the people who work here. And not only have those groups been helping us plan, but they've also donated more than just their time. They've also donated resources for us to be able to plan this as well. And this year, a new thing that we've gotten is transportation to the event. So we worked with Green Mountain Express, and they have 2 bus lines that run on Saturdays, the Green Line South and the Green Line North, and they have 2 buses that will run to the event and 2 buses that will pick up people from the event at the end of the day. And they will charge their fare, which is, I think, something like 50 cents for adults, but for all kids, the buses will be free. And those are just some of the bigger things that we've done to try to make this a more sustainable effort in a world where Vista may not exist here.
Yep, and as Elise mentioned, we're very happy the town's been supporting us and partnering with us. We appreciate that you guys not only let us use Willow Park for free during the day, but we also had a lot of help from people in the town, like Mike McDonough and Larry McLeod, who have been helpful, giving us information, answering questions for us, helping us plan, figuring out the best ways to do things. And we really appreciated that help, and we hope that Youth Appreciation Day can utilize them, or whoever's in their positions, as resources in the future.
And so it's all rainbow and sunshine, but we did have some few obstacles along the way. So what the first one, which is a problem every year, is identifying funding sources. In the past, we've reached out to Stewart's, who's listed. This year, the Bennington Idea Fund helped us out, and that was really great. But again, our solution to this problem is the partnership. So hopefully in the future, because these people are working on this year-round, they can fundraise year-round, or they have budgets that they could, sneak in a few couple $100s for this event for. So it's not like we'll be starting from scratch every year on this project. Hopefully, it's something that this won't be a problem for because of the partnerships. And our second big obstacle is finding volunteers, and this is where I'm going to shamelessly plug that if anyone's free, May 20th from 12 to 4, we could use your help. And hopefully, with ACT and United Way in the town, all working on this and having it in mind throughout the year, this is something that, again, will be easier to do in the future.
Good. It's interesting because we had sort of a chat about this about a year ago, probably. And, it sounds like that's one of the real challenges, the handoff from the three of your predecessor wonderful folks to yourselves, and then making sure there's this tradition, which you are certainly enhancing this year. We appreciate that. It's really here to be congratulated because it doesn't just happen. You're finding out, especially when you're coming fresh into town, making contacts, making the individual relationships that you need to have for this type of an event or an activity. So you're to be congratulated. You're wonderful young women with your perfect examples of what volunteerism is really at its best. Are there questions that the other board members might have? Or if not, we're going to have a proclamation ready.
I have some questions.
Please go right ahead.
What's the target audience that you're aiming at with respect to this? What age range?
So youth is all youth. We don't exclude anyone. It's age 0 to 18. So really, everyone's invited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is that, in advertising and branding, they try to reach kids at a very, very early age to gain enthusiasm and loyalty. And I hope that you're taking advantage of that idea in the sense that, you're going to middle school or even grade school kids who are going to be very wildly enthusiastic about this sort of thing. And, as all of us who have in this room who's ever been a teenager, some things are not entirely cool at a given age of our lives, but getting kids to be involved and active and excited about something like this really, I think, starts early. And I encourage you to take that opportunity. I can see dozens of kids just getting flipped out at an event like this at the right age.
Yeah.
That's it.
I don't have a question, I have some comments. There's definitely more buzz around town, so congratulations. You took the comments we made, and probably other comments that you heard from other organizations, you really took them to heart, and your efforts are really going to bear fruit, I have no doubt. I'm hearing about it, the signs are great. At work today, one of these posters was up, and someone was walking around the office asking for volunteers, so whatever you did worked. Collaboration is key. It's huge, and you have clearly done that and done a great job. Family members, friends of the bands will come. That was a great idea. It's a guaranteed audience. Every parent's going to want to come hear their kid play. So congratulations. I know it's going to be great.
Thank you.
I just had a couple quick things. For those of you in the audience that did not receive one of these, and I don't want to bore anyone tonight, but there's a great list of groups, organizations, major funding sources, and donating businesses. If there's a way we can share this or get this on social media, or if the banner picks it up, great work.
Why don't you read it?
There's a lot of them, but I guess by me saying there's a lot of them, it really is a testament to the hard work you've all been doing in conjunction with other people in this community, because being new to this town, it's hard to make those connections quickly, and many of the businesses on here are asked often to be supporters, and it's nice you guys were able to convince them that this cause is important, so I just applaud you for that. And then lastly, because you guys made the shameless plug for volunteers, I'll help you make the shameless plug for, are you still accepting donors, and are you still accepting more businesses to be part of this?
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes. I knew the answer to that. It was a loaded question, but great work on what you've done, and to the community, there's still opportunities for you to get involved, so hopefully you can track these women down, or however we get in touch with you.
So there's a Facebook page for Youth Appreciation Day. There's also a Facebook event for Youth Appreciation Day. And if you message us through that, we answer pretty quickly.
Great.
So that's also, not all of that information per se will be on the Youth Appreciation Day Facebook page, but the list of donating organizations and the list of people who will be present will be posted in terms of like what activities they're hosting or something like that.
Great work. Just wanted to bring a couple of those things up. So
We'll just make this a part of the minutes. We'll just incorporate it so it'll be available to everyone. Ask Jim to read the proclamation. Yep. Sorry. Jim, would you care to read
I'd
the
be more than
proclamation?
happy to. From the town of Bennington, a proclamation. Youth Appreciation Day, May 20th, 2017. Whereas the youth of Bennington County participate in volunteer activities and programs through their schools, religious organizations, or privately for the betterment of their community. And whereas many youth of Bennington are employed in the region, providing needed services for the people of southern Vermont, and whereas the youth of Bennington participate in school and non-school activities which provide greatly needed enjoyment and entertainment in this community. And whereas the youth of Bennington are engaged in the use and development of technology, which promote new skills and abilities that enhance the county, and whereas the youth of Bennington are engaged in projects that improve the environment, including, but not limited to, participating in local Green Up Day, and whereas many youth of Bennington provide support services which enable family members to be employed, thus supporting their families. And whereas the youth of Bennington are essential for the growth and development of an economy where entrepreneurs will prosper, where a culture of respect, commitment, and independence will flourish, and where an educational system will develop students for the future of the town and the state. Now, therefore, we, the Bennington Select Board, do hereby proclaim May 20th, 2017 as Youth Appreciation Day in the town of Bennington, dated at Bennington this 8th day of May, 2017. Select Board, Town of Bennington.
Thank you. Colleagues, we've heard the proclamation read. Is there a motion to accept it as read?
I'd make a motion.
Second.
Second, great. Without further discussion, all in favor of the proclamation?
Aye.
Aye. Without hesitation, 7 in favor. Can we have it? That's coming down?
copy.
Oh, good. Sit tight for a minute. I would just get the signature.
We'll sign fast.
Yes.
Yeah, I would just, because somehow
go
I
ahead.
didn't raise my hand fast enough.
Yeah.
No, I also want to echo what everyone has been saying, and I think it is really impressive, the number of organizations that you have on board, because I think that does solve a piece of the puzzle that's been problematic every year of starting from scratch. So it feels like it's a very nice group of organizations that you've gotten involved in. And I'm hoping that there is a volunteer pool that's attached to organizations as well as individuals, because this feels like it just gets bigger and better every year, so thank you.
Does the community college pitch in? Do any of the colleges get involved, or?
Yeah, was
Bennington
it?
College has volunteers, but unfortunately SVC this year's out before the event is. So that's a problem we're having, is the end of May, a lot of colleges are finished by then.
And where again can people find this information?
So on our
The sponsors?
Facebook page, it's the Bennington Youth Appreciation Day Facebook page.
Facebook page,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Thank you very much, all three of you. Howard, thanks very much for coming in tonight. Good luck to you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, one and all. We'll go into the other part of the business of our meeting tonight. Dan, you're going to lead us through the initial discussion on the TIF development proposal that we have received and actually conferred about a bit. We can't tell the world that Bennington is going to be applying for a TIF because as of right now, the legislature hasn't made its decision unless someone's heard within the last couple hours.
Actually, the legislature won't reconvene until Wednesday, so this is part of the last part of the legislative actions. It's part of a much larger bill, but I can tell you that the word I'm getting is that more than likely, some sort of TIF legislation will come out of the legislature this year. The numbers and the length of time that TIFs will be available may change from what the Senate version was. And I think giving some credit to Joey Culkin, who did a marvelous Facebook piece, he talked to a lot of individuals who were in favor and in opposition to the language, and I think you get the sense that everybody believes that something is going to come out of this session.
We're reasonably optimistic. I think that's what we have to carry with us. With that optimism comes preparedness, and we've got to be prepared to go. Whether it's 1, 2, or 15, we have to be in a position to move and strike quickly because that line could get long, and even if it's 1, we want to be first. In order to do that, though, we need some assistance from those that have come before us that know how to get through the process, both to identify the extent of the district and how the process goes as far as delivering the application. This is not, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. If we did, we would be spending a lot of time and even more money trying to come to that point. This is a situation that has happened before in Vermont. We want to take the best of what's already occurred, having in mind that the legislature is going to give some direction and maybe some constraint on that. But at the same time, we want to be able to step off, and the sooner we do that is once we get our facilitator, for lack of a better, and we're suggesting that Burke and White, who's been down this road before and has shared a very good proposal with us, will be the consultant for that purpose. I think what I'd like to have Dan do is take us through the steps and where we're at and how we might facilitate some of those steps being identified and dealt with early on so that we don't get stacked up. Because one of the worst things we can do is find we're going down a road that it's dead-ended, and we don't have that time either.
Great, thank you, Tom. So, as you mentioned, the Select Board has been very proactive with regard to the TIF legislation, and we wanted to be ready to hit the ground running if and when, hopefully, TIFs are reauthorized. So, with that in mind, the Select Board authorized the staff to go out and solicit a proposal from White and Burke regarding a development of a TIF district, which will take some significant effort. White and Burke has made a proposal. I know you folks have looked at it previously, and this is the final, what we hope is the final version that we hope that you folks will authorize management to sign if TIFs are authorized. And as Stuart mentioned, we're feeling very optimistic. But again, we want to be ready day one to start this process. So the proposal is set forth in 2 phases. So phase 1 is basically what they call a feasibility analysis. And that consists of 3 components, at least. Analysis of the physical boundaries of the district. Where should the TIF district be? What should it include? Whitenburg's going to help us through that process. What are the costs of the infrastructure we're going to want to and need to build in order to attract the private investment we want to? So again, that would be analysis of that. And we'll also need to look at what are the potential new tax revenues that will be generated by the private investment that we hope to attract. They take all that, they look at that, and then they decide, they do an analysis of how that can be, how those necessary infrastructure improvements can be financed, what's the bond structures we'll be looking at, what's the debt service we can afford, what's the debt load we can afford to pay for with the new tax revenues, and they come up, Whitenburg will then come up with a proposal of what they believe, based on input from lots of different stakeholders, including the select board and private property owners, potential developers, potential tenants, potential, all the necessary stakeholders that would be appropriate to discuss this proposal with. They'll come up with a TIF district proposal at the end of phase one. And they will recommend moving forward if they can find a way that makes sense and can be financed through new tax revenue. We feel very confident based on the level of investment we already expect with current projects that we know are on the horizon, but they'll be looking at additional possible projects as well and do an analysis of that. So phase one, feasibility analysis, potential TIF district plan. Phase two, they'll take that information and they'll develop a strategy and a timeline for implementing the improvements that the TIF that are suggested in the TIF district, and they'll present that to the public and to the select board. And so phase two will be adoption of the plan, hopefully by the select board, and then presentation of the plan and hopefully adoption from the Vermont Economic Progress Council, which is a state of Vermont agency charged in the past, and we expect in the future, with reviewing and approving TIF projects. So phase two is really two steps. First step, engaging the public and the select board and seeking approval from the select board of the TIF plan. So you will vote on the TIF plan. If the select board approves it, it will then go to VEPC, and that's where the real hard work will start, because VEPC is very, very careful in their analysis. They're very thorough, and we need to put a very good plan forward that has lots of data and analysis to support a TIF plan and the level of indebtedness that we see as appropriate with regard to our TIF plan. So phase two will include Whitenburg's presentation to the VEPC folks, and our ultimate goal with regard to phase two is getting approval from VEPC. So that's the proposal that you'll be authorizing, we hope, the management to sign if indeed TIFs are authorized by the legislature. There is a very important and very necessary phase three, which we will proceed with if phase two is adopted or phase two is successful with VEPC, and that is the actual bonding for the indebtedness to fund the infrastructure improvements that are necessary to attract the private investment. And that bonding, obviously, as everyone knows, that's when the public will vote, and only if the public votes in favor of it will we proceed to actually implement the TIF district. So lots and lots of time for the public to be involved, select board level, VEPC level, because they'll have hearings, and then ultimately whether or not the bond is approved. So we need to make sure that we include the public and that everybody is on board and comfortable with the plan that we ultimately approve. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions.
I think let's have a dialogue. Basically, cost for the two.
Yes, important. Phase one is estimated at $15,000 not to exceed. Could come in less, often doesn't. And phase two is a $20,000 estimate. Both of these costs will be recoverable if indeed a TIF district is approved. In other words, the additional tax revenue generated by the new development can be used to offset those costs. So if we are ultimately successful and the TIF district plan proceeds, those costs will be recovered. Our proposal, staff's proposal to the select board is that initially those costs would come out of the Economic Development Fund, which is dedicated to these sorts of projects. It is, as we've mentioned in the past, the result of federal grant monies that we received decades ago and have been paid back through loan programs. So it isn't local taxpayer money, it is federal grant money that we've dedicated for economic development.
Great.
Which is why I feel is appropriate for this particular project.
One of the things that, that phase one, looks like there's a lot of analysis of the studies besides the discussions amongst the potential interested parties. We've got a townwide study that wasn't done that long ago. We've got other studies that we paid dearly for, and the state has. I would hope that using some of the information that's gleaned from those, we can both enhance or save some money and also move the thing along. So do you expect that would be part of what that Burke and White would be looking for?
Absolutely. In fact, we sent them those studies as part of their development of this proposal, and basically the second sentence in their proposal is that they would be reviewing those, consolidating those, using those as a basis for their analysis going forward. So they feel very confident that the information included in the downtown area-wide plan is a good first step for the feasibility analysis. There's a lot of the information that they would need to have gathered on their own has already been gathered and very well documented for their use. And that, as we know, it's a fairly recent document, so will require very little updating. So that will provide a basis for their moving forward with the analysis.
Will we be involved in that discussion as a select board so that we can make sure that they're getting broad enough in their scope, or are we going to just get a report, or what's the reporting process back?
Well, we would expect that the select board would be involved as stakeholders in the discussion process. The consultant, they list as the stakeholders minimum that they will be talking to is property owners, developers, town officials, including town departments such as the Public Works and Assessor's Office. Those are all folks that they definitely will be talking to as they do their analysis.
And businesses in town and the...
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Timeline?
They expect the initial phase one to be 90 days or so. Phase two will take likely 6 months. So we are talking a fairly lengthy process, depending upon the level of effort that staff wants to put in, which we're certainly willing to do that. We could crunch that down a little bit sooner, especially if we feel that there's a lot of competition. If there's only 2 TIF districts authorized, we're going to be wanting to crunch that down as much as possible so that we can be first in the door.
Chad, do you want to start? Run down?
We've discussed this before, but I guess for the benefit of the public, what if the legislative group doesn't create a TIF district, and we sign this agreement? What do we get if there's no TIF district?
Well, that's a good question, and I think that's something that we would not broach today, because I think we're assuming that the TIF districts will be developed, and so we would not authorize White and Burke to proceed unless there was a TIF district authorized. However, you are correct in that this is drafted so that if a TIF district isn't authorized, we can still get benefit out of phase one, so that they'll take that analysis and instead of developing a TIF district plan, they'll develop a plan that would use the resources we have available to us without a TIF district to stimulate economic development. We're not proposing that we sign this agreement without returning back to you folks unless the TIF districts are authorized. But absolutely, the folks at White and Burke really thought ahead in their proposal and wanted to make sure that if we did begin work before TIF districts were authorized, that we would get value from phase one.
Thank you.
Can I, so just continuing the timeline, so once we've completed phase 1 and 2, so assuming we're going forward with the TIF proposal, phase 1 and 2 are done, what's the timing? So then we go out for a bond vote. So I'm just trying to think, so are we talking from soup to nuts? Is it like a year process or a year and a half process, or?
Well, I think in order to, once we get, I guess just to back up a little bit, once we get VEPC approval,
Yeah.
we're in, and so we don't have to immediately go to bond in order to keep our TIF district approval. We do have to
Okay.
do it in a timely fashion.
Okay.
So there will be, we don't know exactly when, but usually it's a 20-year time, 7-year time limit, and it might be less than that for us to enter the indebtedness. So we will want to move reasonably quickly.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
ideally, I would say within a year and a half to 2 years, we want to have that bond locked down.
Okay, so really the timeline that is most critical is the phase 1.
Phase 1 and 2 is most critical. We want to get that VEPC approval while there are still, hopefully, TIF plans, districts available.
And then if we weren't chosen for a TIF district, then we're back to what do we want to do with this information we have and the funding?
Yes, I guess yes, and I would say that I think if we make it to the VEPC application, I don't want to say anything that would jinx us, but it's very unlikely we wouldn't be approved because Whitenburg is not going to enter into that process lightly. They have a reputation to withhold. They are not going to want to fail, so they're going to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row and that we have everything we need to make sure that that proposal to the VEPC folks goes smoothly.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, thank you for working on this. It's great. Probably many of you were at the redevelopment group meeting last week, which was so well attended and was so exciting. And if you weren't there, you should go and see the CAT TV filming of it because it was really a powerful moment for Bennington, the beginning of a powerful moment. And I think we're looking at something that could be truly transformative change for Bennington. It's not going to fix all of our problems, but it could well be the kind of thing that tips the balance on this, on some of our fortune here in town. And so I think we should make this one of the very highest priorities for the town. And when we get through with this conversation, I'd like to make a motion that we instruct our town to work on it haste post haste to make sure that we have the best quality application in as soon as we can get it in. I'm willing to bet that some kind of district, TIF district thing will come through, and if that happens, I think Bennington really needs to do everything we can do to be lined up, to be right there with the best proposal in the state. I think the bones of it are probably one of the best proposals that you could imagine. But I'd love to have us be doing everything we can for that. Dan, my one question for you would be, at that presentation, a number of my friends asked me afterwards why they didn't talk about TIF districts at the presentation, and probably it was one of those things that was a little bit too specific or a little bit too detailed. But would you be willing to just, in layman's terms, talk about how important you think this TIF district is to the redevelopment effort, in just very general terms?
Sure. So I think they did get the message across loud and clear that the cost to develop this project far exceeds the value created in the minds, at least, of traditional financiers. So I guess in layman's terms, it's going to cost a lot more money than they're going to be able to borrow to build this facility, build these improvements that they hope to do. So everything that is the gap between the value that the bank will lend on and the cost of the project has to come from somewhere else, not the bank. It's not the bank's not doing a loan for it. So they're going to have to cobble together, as they mentioned, federal funding through tax credits, both historic preservation and new market, through community development block grants, and through other funding sources, whether it be through the community investing in itself, or tax increment financing, district type financing. So this part, if we can adopt a TIF, it will help to fund, it will fund public improvements that are necessary for the project. So if there's public parking that's needed, if there's improvements to streetscape, if there's water and sewer infrastructure, if there's stormwater infrastructure, if there's pedestrian infrastructure, all that can be paid for with new taxes generated by the project. This is new, above and beyond what's currently being generated, so nobody's taxes today are going to be implicated negatively. This is all new tax revenue that would be dedicated to that particular, those particular improvements. And I want to stress too, I think we may get too focused on the TIF district as being strictly a Putnam project facilitator, and it will be, and that's why we have, it's the catalyst for it, but we see this as a much broader tool to develop larger swaths of downtown, not just, and I don't say just because it's a big project, but not only the Putnam redevelopment project. So, and there are lots of infrastructure needs in other parts of downtown that we need to address in order to attract the level of private investment necessary to really jumpstart development downtown.
I think you've done a good job, though, of keeping our legislators, you and Stuart and Tom and others, apprised of how important this TIF district is for the redevelopment effort in particular. And if we want that to happen, we need this to happen.
It's, you know, we talked some time ago about public-private investment, and I think it was our predecessor, Michael Keene, said if you don't invest in yourself, you don't get investment in your community. Well, basically the TIF district is probably going to be one of our biggest investments as a community in the redevelopment of the community. So folks sometimes think it's going to be their tax bill, that's their investment, but there are other ways that a community invests in itself. And this is one of the best tools that could possibly be available for that community enhancement.
And we've said it before, we've said it lots of times, but I think it bears saying again, this is a way to invest in infrastructure without negatively impacting the local taxpayer. And I think that's what's most important. This is why this is such an important tool. If we don't have TIF districts, if we don't have a TIF district tool, then the only way that we can invest in infrastructure is to levy additional taxes on the existing grand list, which would be a burden on our taxpayers. This is a way to generate income that will pay for infrastructure without burdening our taxpayers. And I think this is such an important thing about TIF districts and why they're such a useful tool, because it's a creative way to fund infrastructure without burdening your taxpayers.
I mostly want to say what Donald said. It was well done. But Dan, can you give us a rough estimate of the amount of revenue that TIF district would generate, well, not generate, but what we would have at our disposal over the course of the TIF district?
Well, I can't give you a number because we don't have the analysis done yet, but what I can tell you is where the money comes from. So it's from new tax, it's generated by new development, in other words, based on the expansion of the grand list. And the important thing about this is that 75% of the money that we would normally be sending upstate to the education fund, we get to retain here in town to invest in our public infrastructure. And I think it's important to remind folks, this is new tax revenue that would not be generated but for the fact that we are investing in this infrastructure. So it'll be millions of dollars. How many millions? I don't know, and it'll all depend on how many projects happen. We do know that for the Putnam project, it's estimated for between $2 and $4 million of new investment that could be generated by the additional tax revenues.
Okay.
And that's just one project. And again, I don't want to too much focus on the Putnam project because we want to look globally at the downtown.
And I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, people are not going to escape taxes. It's not going to be a further burden on the taxpayers if the TIF district is formed.
That's the important thing for folks to appreciate, yeah, and that's why it's such a powerful tool.
But we can't, not to make promises, because we can't make promises, but when you enhance your grand list, it's not just limited to this district, and it basically has the impact across the community. If we're fortunate enough, the entire grand list could be enhanced, not just the portion that we're dealing with the development area.
The TIF district area, yes.
The company you selected to do the project, as far as going through the different phases, can you just talk a little bit about their historical kind of,
Sure.
good kind of their history with this space and what other towns they've helped move through this process?
So Whitenburg, recognized expert, they've done virtually all of the TIF proposals in the state of Vermont, and they've been successful in every single one. So some of the towns, going to sound familiar to you, Burlington, they did their downtown TIF district. They did the White River Junction TIF district, the St. Albans City TIF district, and the City of Barry TIF district, so among others. But those are the ones that they've, most recent ones that they've been involved in. So high level of experience. The person who prepared and got those particular TIF proposals approved, still on staff, will be our main point person. So, sometimes you have a company, staff changes, you're not really getting the same person. We get the same person who's been successful in the past with those projects. So, feel really, really confident that we have the right organization, hopefully under contract soon. So,
thank you.
You may not be able to answer this question, or it may not even be relevant. When VEPC is approving or disapproving of TIF districts, say that 3 times fast, do they take into consideration where they're located? In other words, there aren't any in southern Vermont that I know of. And do they take into consideration need in a community? So are they trying to make sure that there are TIF districts established throughout the state and that they're in communities based on need to some level?
So, as far as I know, the answer to that is no, and this is why. They're charged with making sure that the proposal will, A, stimulate the development that is proposed, and that they will be viable. In other words, the development that is likely to occur will generate additional tax revenues and will be sufficient to cover any bond costs. So they do a very, very thorough look at that to make sure that it will work and that it is viable and sustainable. And they can't be distracted by, well, we really like this town, they really deserve it, let's just give it to them even though we don't think it's going to work. So they have to be pretty ruthless in their analysis, and that's where Whitenburg comes in, because they're going to be really, really sure that all the data and analysis necessary for VEPC to make that positive decision is there and very clear. You don't get by on merit on this one, you get by if you got the raw numbers to make it work.
Okay.
Can I ask, so are there other towns that are also contracting with them to do the same work? And is there a queue?
I don't know the answer to that. I have not heard of that, but that doesn't mean there aren't other folks who are considering hiring them. There were 6 towns that hired them to do the lobbying.
Yes.
I feel pretty confident we're, if not the first, among the first folks to actually be out of the gate on this particular project, this development of a TIF. Can I promise that they haven't talked to anybody else? I just don't know. I haven't asked that question. I could certainly ask them tomorrow when I talk to them.
It seems pretty unlikely that the other towns would hire Whitenburg to do this without at least some aspiration to have a TIF district. And with that, I'd like to make a motion that we ask our town staff to follow through with this proposal with great expedition and get this before us again as soon as possible, please.
Second?
Second.
Third? No.
Just to clarify the motion, so are you authorizing staff to sign the proposal?
Yes.
Okay. Assuming that TIFs are...
And also with the understanding, which you and I talked about before the meeting, that at the end of phase 1, we'll have an understanding of whether or not we go through phase 2.
Absolutely. No, they're not going to proceed, you're not going to proceed.
Exactly.
If phase one analysis doesn't
That's the
come out
beauty of it,
positive.
yeah. It's inexpensive to, relatively inexpensive to see if we can make this work, which I believe we can.
Yes. Okay, thank you, sorry.
Other discussion on the pending motion? I think we've talked and heard, and we continue to get educated on the TIF. Having heard no further questions or discussion warranted, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
That's 7 in favor to push forward quickly and report back to us by the next meeting relative to success. I'm sure we'll hear from the media relative to what's happening or not happening on Wednesday and Thursday. We moved on it, so let's not try to figure out another question until and if. Thanks, Dan.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Tom, if I may, I think we owe a debt of thanks to our local legislative delegation. Both the House and certainly the Senators Sears and Campion were principally effective in getting the original Senate legislation passed. I understand that Senator Campion will be sitting on the conference committee, and so that's a very good thing for us. But I think if you run into our representatives, I understand that they were pretty much all in favor of this particular legislation, and we should thank them for that.
Yes,
Thank you. And I think that extends to a representative from Pownell as well in that context, right?
I do too. Thank you.
Okay. We'll wait to celebrate. But thanks for that, and it's really our legislative contingency has stepped up to the plate, and hopefully we're going to round the third and come home with it.
Still a few more days, but hopefully we'll complete the mission, so thank you very much.
Dan. Okay. Dealing with the South Ved's board action, Mike McDonough is going to speak to that relative to what is needed for discussion on that one.
As he makes his way to the microphone, I think this is the larger picture that has been occurring, principally begun in Windham County, but we've been making, I think, great strides to try to come even with them. And I asked Mike to come here tonight and talk a little bit about the effect of some of the recent actions of the Southern Economic Development Group and how it might impact Bennington County.
As I understand, this all came out of the Southern Vermont Economic Development Zone Committee report back in 2015, I guess, right? And this is sort of the continuing next step, and we're trying to catch up in some ways. But this is, as Stu said, it's like the big, broader picture where we've been talking about Bennington and our local development. This is the region, the southwestern part of Vermont, southern part of Vermont, and that we're not an island here in Bennington. I think that's what we're learning from everyone that's been involved in that Southern Vermont effort, because folks that have been leaving Vermont have not just been leaving Bennington, they've been leaving all parts of Vermont. And this is, I'm going to ask Mike if you could just tell us where the effort is to change that tide, or redirect the tide.
I'm happy to. I think it's very timely, excuse me. It's very timely that we're talking about economic development issues, actually in the first 3 agenda items this evening. You might want to, well, the last one, TIF, is obvious, and this one's pretty obvious. The first one was about economic development too, because our young people, no matter how young or how close they are to leaving high school, are going to be part of our economic development future. And so I think we have a nice continuum of discussion and topics here tonight, and I particularly want us to keep that one in mind. It's also timely that this is National Economic Development Week. And
no proclamation?
No. It was a well-kept secret. It was proclaimed by the International Economic Development Council. So it's nice to know that there is an International Economic Development Council that is proclaiming things like National Economic Development Week. Well, the importance of that, and as Stuart and Tom prefaced, all of the things that we're talking about are in this bigger context. And we know from past efforts that we have made involving the select board and groups within the community, we developed our own economic development strategy. Manchester has developed their own economic development strategy, but there's a missing piece in that, and the missing piece is that those economic development strategies are very much siloed. And the whole goal of this next process that we're embarking in is to take down the silos and to prompt us to do some things that for some of us are hard to do. Those of us who grew up in Bennington think of our neighbors to the north and our neighbors to the east as rivals. And for too many years...
Friday nights usually.
Yeah. Well, I remember Tuesdays and Fridays.
Yeah, right.
That's a different sport. It's been hard, I think, for all of us, for all of the communities in southern Vermont, to get beyond that sense of turning inward and going over the mountains and going up the valleys and becoming part of a bigger picture. Now, I want to also start my comments this evening with what is actually a footnote to the piece that you received in your packets. This is information that has been used in all of the conversations that we've had with regards to the economic development efforts that we're now embarking on. And there's 4 bullets that I want to draw attention to. Not to be pessimistic in any way, but to be realistic in the challenges that we face. The first bullet involves shrinking population. We are projected to be down 3.5% by the year 2030, while the rest of Vermont is projected to be down 0.5%. So there's a comparison with the rest of the state of Vermont that I think suggests that the impetus that the legislature has placed on southern Vermont is well placed. We have an aging population. It's projected, based on census information and studies, that 30% of the population will be over 65 by the year 2030. In the 2010 census, that projection, or that number is 17.6%. So there's going to be an incredible change in our demographics if the status quo holds. The third bullet, and I think that we're all cognizant of this, and we're all struggling to find ways to solve this problem. We have many jobs unfilled within our community and the communities of southern Vermont, and yet people are looking for work. So there's a disconnect there, and we all know the complexities of bridging that disconnect and eliminating that disconnect. It has been suggested or documented by Vermont JobLink in 2016 that of 7,529 job listings, there were 3,057 job seekers. Now, that's the comparison of people with adequate skills and background to even consider seeking the number of positions that are available. We see our employment rates falling, but it's not having the kind of impact on quality of life and our economic situation within families as it should be. And then the last item, and Matt Harrington, who is here this evening, is certainly attuned to this. Tourism revenues have rebounded since the Great Recession, but more slowly than northern Vermont. The rooms and meals tax receipts in northern Vermont are up 37%. In southern Vermont, they're up 11%. Retail sales in northern Vermont are up 4%. In southern Vermont, they're down 11%. And so those 4 items, I think, set the stage for understanding the importance of taking the wonderful opportunity that is presented to us by the Putnam redevelopment and contextualizing that into a much bigger need. And so, as was mentioned, actually in May of 2014, the legislature, as the result of studies, enacted the Southern Vermont Economic Development Zone and a committee for that zone. And essentially, it's Windham and Bennington counties with Weston thrown in. And that has to do with the coverage of the regional commissions in each county. Now, serving on the committee that was formed from Bennington were Michael Keene, a former select board member, Dr. Marco Silver, the president of Bennington College, and Bill Collin. So we were certainly well represented in that process. And a comprehensive report was issued by the committee December 1 of 2015. The report contained 10 specific recommendations for southern Vermont, but they emphasized 2 in particular, and one, the principal recommendation, is the one that we're talking about tonight, and that is to create a comprehensive economic development strategy, or CEDS, C-E-D-S, covering Bennington and Windham counties, plus the town of Weston. So, I regret to say, going back to that rivalry piece that I mentioned before, Windham County is out ahead of us in this process, and I think Dan made some reference to that as well. They began their process to do this in 2010. Again, with no Southern Vermont regional component to it. This was 4 years before the legislature formed the Economic Development Zone. And so from that, the Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategy, or SEVEDS, was completed, and that was in 2013. And it was ultimately approved by the Economic Development Administration, which is part of the process. But, and I think this is important to note, when the EDA approved the Windham County SEDS, they said, this SEDS is too small. By standards that the EDA goes by in terms of judging SEDS, regionalization should be broad and it should encompass larger populations. And so they got their SEDS almost on a waiver. And there's a component of that will come back in the story to apply to us. And so within this context, and understanding that the Southern Vermont Economic Development Zone was pushing for a SEDS, the Bennington County Regional Commission, who we know is playing an increasingly strong role in the areas of economic development in conjunction with their affiliation with Bennington County Industrial Corporation, formed a Regional Economic Development Working Group, or RED. The membership of that working group was broad, included people from throughout the county, and you received a roster of that working group in your packet. And I'll jump to the important specific of the work thus far of the RED group. On April 12th, at Bennington College and the Kappa facility. And by the way, I want to mention the very positive role that Bennington College has played in this process by being willing to host a number of meetings at their Kappa facility. But on April 12th, the RED group unanimously approved a proposal to request that the SEVEDS board from Windham County entertain entering into a common SEDS for all of southern Vermont. And that was followed on April 27th by the SEVEDS board unanimously voting in favor of a joint proposal for a southern Vermont SEDS. Now, there's a quid pro quo here. they need to expand their SEDS. And their SEDS is up for renewal this summer. And that issue of its being too small was undoubtedly going to be an issue in their renewal. The alternative to working closely with SEVIDS is that Bennington County would go it alone. And with Windham County already on notice, that Bennington County would not have been able to put together a SEDS, and it would not be a realistic and effective SEDS. So with those two things in place, with the working group having asked the SEVIDS board to work jointly with Bennington County in developing a comprehensive Southern Vermont economic development strategy in conjunction with their renewal, the staff at BCRC and the Bennington Development Credit Corporation, or BDCC, are preparing a grant application to the EDA to fund the creation of the expanded SEDS. And it is hoped that that application will be submitted by the end of May. Now, as you'll note in your materials, and I'll mention later on, there are commitments that each county will need to make in conjunction with that process. Not unlike the complexities of TIF, the comprehensive economic development strategies are complex. And it's impossible to think of a board of, or a group or a committee of citizens could sit down and produce the kind of economic development detail and data that would be necessary in order to create this comprehensive economic development strategy. And so the EDA makes grant monies available to assist communities and regions that want to move in this direction. And so that process will involve the identification and coordination of economic development goals and efforts for both Windham County and Bennington County, and in particular, and this is an important point relative to Bennington County, we'll develop those kinds of economic goals and strategies for our two shires, the North Shire and the South Shire. Now, there's a subset issue here, and that subset issue is, as we look east and west, we have to create a communication and a common set of goals north-south within our county. Now, it's interesting, at the last meeting, Matt was talking about the bridges that are occurring relative to the South Shire and the North Shire, having to do with tourism and the visitor's guide and so on. Well, that same thing needs to be accomplished relative to a SEDS. And this isn't a criticism of the North Shire or the South Shire, but it's apparent that we have different goals, different outlooks. We are different. And so we have to develop a strategy that will build on those differences, include those differences, but coordinate them in a way that then can become part of the Southern Vermont Economic Development SEDS. And so, just to recap, the target areas, Bennington and Windham counties plus Weston. In terms of SEDS funding, the application submitted to the EDA will be for $80,000, which will be an implementation grant to support the development of the bi-county SEDS. A $40,000 commitment in cash and in-kind services will be required from each county to match the $80,000 that will come from the EDA. The details of how that match will be constructed and distributed throughout the two counties will be part of the process in developing the application. In terms of organization, the Red Group and the SEVIDS Board will act as steering committees for their respective sub-regions. They will establish objectives and strategies best suited to their respective counties, which would be integrated into the regional SEDS. A joint bi-county board will be formed, comprised of members nominated by the steering committees. The board will meet 4 to 6 times a year to oversee, coordinate, and evaluate the efforts in conjunction with the SEDS. In terms of timeline, the RED, as I said, the RED Working Group and the SEVIDS Board have both concluded that we want to move in this direction. It is planned that the EPA implementation grant will be available to us in fall of 2017. The development of a joint SEDS during the 2017-2018 time period. The Bennington County Board would approve a resulting joint SEDS hopefully by 2018, and EDA approval would follow with the joint SEDS in place sometime during the period of 2018-2019. So I would be happy to, and you've received a copy of that document that the RED Group approved at that April meeting. So I would be happy to answer any questions or have some discussion with the board relative to our moving forward in this regard. And then in closing, I would mention a couple of other things in the economic development front that we have going on.
Great. Questions?
I just have one. So you touched on there'll be some sort of evaluation of the success of the creation of this. What kinds of data will you be looking for? Is it tourism? Is it employment? You know, how do you plan on?
Well, it will be comprehensive and across the board, and I don't have the numbers for you this evening, but one of the things that's been documented to the RED Group is that since the inception of the SEVIDS strategy in Windham County, the numbers are strikingly positive in terms of increased investment, increased workforce, increased availability of jobs. In all of those markers, there has been improvement in Windham County. And I think it's reasonable to infer a connection between having a detailed strategy and seeing that kind of progress. And so those would be the kind of measures that I think we'll be using throughout southern Vermont.
That's great. I don't know if we can handle any more good news. I just, this is amazing.
Well, that's why I started with the bad news, so that you'd forget it.
Go ahead.
The packet that was provided helped educate before you got here, which was really helpful, but then going through it added kind of a little more life to it. To quote Donald down there, he had said kind of the great bones, and that's what was easy to read, but then you added life to it. Just curious though, the dollars and cents, you said $80,000?
Yes.
That's annually?
No.
I don't understand how that money's getting...
That's to produce the SEDS strategy.
Okay, so that's just a strategy piece?
Yes.
Because I'm thinking 80,000 spread across all those counties isn't going to take you very far, or towns, I should say. So that's where I was curious to know.
Yeah, that's only, that's essentially to cover the expense and to hire a consultant.
Great. That's one part that I wasn't understanding,
Yeah.
just where the money, where that started and ended, and then also kind of the strategy piece. So the dollars and cents is not figured out, it's just the implementation of the strategy, and then funds flow as a result of that, or is there any dollars kind of credited as a result of the implementation of the strategy, or is it just, how does that work?
Only those that would be available and are available through federal grant programs as they evolve in the coming years. And so a comprehensive economic development strategy does not generate funds in and of itself.
No, understood.
And so it gives us value, in a sense, of being able to go out and seek grant support. As in the case with the Putnam redevelopment.
Great. In comparing it to the success of our eastern neighbor, have you seen a lot of examples of grants that became available to them as their strategy was implemented? I mean, it's only been 4 years or so, or how long have they been kind of exercising their strategy? I
honestly can't explain their numbers. And the increase in their numbers. I think that would be an interesting thing for us to do as we embark on our SEDS on this side of the mountain, is to understand what tools they utilize to get to where they are.
The working group you put together is great. I'm guessing it's all public information, but the group you guys have already put it together is really remarkable.
Yeah, that was brought together by the regional commission.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope
it's a great group of people.
Anyone who's had the ability to read it, it's rewarding to see.
Yep.
surprisingly, no.
Nope. I thought that Jim was going to say, we're tired of hearing about the old and the poor. It seems like we get this over and over. Our communities, our states getting older, and it's nice to have, let's redirect the focus on how we change that and not spend so much time and energy, because that's almost self-defeating. I think about 2 years ago, we decided to almost recognize a Southern strategy of sorts, and we did reserve, I think, what, a couple, 15,000 or
15,000.
Yeah.
15,000 in this current budget as well.
Yeah. So we already got our contribution for that initial purpose almost in hand. It's supposed to incent other smaller communities to join that effort. Thanks, Mike and Bill Colvin and BCRC, Jonathan Cooper, for pulling this all together, because it's hard enough to have a strategy in a neighborhood, much less in a region, and that's what the effort is. But as Carson said, we've got some real good folks that are getting ready to take this on. Thanks. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Remind me, Mike, and I think we've already covered this, but between SEDS and SEVEDS and REDS, if any alliteration,
I don't want to go there.
That I've gotten a little bit confused, but the 40,000 commitment comes out of the RED.
No, it comes from each county.
Comes from each county, okay.
Yes.
And so how would that be apportioned, or is that just something that...
That's yet to be determined.
Okay.
But one would assume that the principal growth centers within each county would bear the brunt of that expense. And the smaller communities within the counties would determine on their own behest how much value they see in their reaping the benefits of the SEDS. Now, and I think that's an important selling point for all of us to make, and this has been a point of discussion in the regional group, the REDS. It's important to understand that economic advancement in, say, a Bennington or a Manchester or a Windsor, Springfield, Brattleboro, because they're the centers of economic and activity and commerce within their counties, the whole county benefits from the success that takes place in those development nodes, if you want to call them that. To the extent that we can get everyone in the two respective counties to buy into that and to understand the importance of that, the further along we'll be.
Mm-hmm. What's, I think you also have covered this, but I don't remember what the answer, but what's happening up in Windsor County, which normally associates pretty closely with Wyndham? Are they doing something on their own?
They're not included in the Southern Vermont zone.
But do you know what's happening in that to them at this point? Are they?
Yeah. No, I honestly don't. Now there's an interesting piece of this. Bellows Falls is part of this economic development process, and I've been in some joint meetings with representatives from Bellows Falls, and you never think of Bellows Falls when you think of the need for economic development within Southern Vermont. Interestingly enough, they seem to look with some, envy is not the right word, but they think that we've got our act together in many respects. And of course, we all sit back and say, we do. That's a little sidebar benefit of being in the same room with people from other communities, is finding out what their image of you is, and learning that your image of their communities might be a little off target.
Yeah, I guess that must be interesting. I was getting at a little bit whether or not Bennington and Rutland together make a fully viable SEDS, or whether at some point there might be a further amalgamation that might include other counties like Wyndham, Windsor or Rutland or something like that. Or if we really, once we get to Bennington and Brattleboro, that's going to be Bennington and Wyndham, that's going to be
But
enough.
that's an interesting point. But I think right now, the focus, supported by the statistics that I began with, have said that these two counties need to catch up. Rutland County, they're holding their own. But Bennington and Wyndham counties are lagging behind the rest of the state, and we need to stop that.
Yeah, great, thank you very much.
Well, so it is a great group. So I sit on the red group, as does Lynn Green and Dan and Mike, and it is a really diverse group. I just wanted to note that 40,000 is both donation, is in kind,
Oh, yes, cash,
as well
cash and
as
in kind.
cash.
So, yes,
So it isn't all
we're able
cash.
to fulfill that match requirement in both those manners.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I also wanted to say so I chair the Workforce and Education Working Group in the South Shire, along with Wendy Morse from the Department of Labor. And in the last month, we've actually expanded that to start a group in the North Shire. So in about a month, we're going to have a first meeting that replicates sort of the combination of local folks from the North Shire as well as sort of county-wide entities that are involved to start looking at how to put more of a focus on workforce and education and the connection between those two. We were invited to Pauline Moore, who's the Economic Development Coordinator in town of Manchester, and Wendy Morse and I just did a really nice segment on GNAT last week, talking about workforce and ed and how that and how that can help expand people's thinking. So I think that is another way that we connect. Our issues in many ways are the same, but the ways we're going to get there are going to be, the way we're going to solve our problems are going to be different. So, but thank you very much for the presentation today.
Thanks. I want to say thank you. I appreciate the work that's being done. I've always felt, you mentioned the rivalries, and instead of communities working against each other, I know usually like our weekend of Mayfest, which is coming up, is usually the same as Brattleboro's. I think has a craft beer fest. They have another festival as well. So instead of trying to compete to get people to go to one or the other, they can go to both. And just really work together. I appreciate stuff like that. So thank you. The only recommendation I would see is once we get together is that maybe we recommend the team colors be red, white, and blue, and not purple.
So noted.
If you don't have any other questions relative to SEDS, I just wanted to mention a couple of things briefly. There are some other fronts on which we're working relative to economic development. And hey, here's another acronym, the Southern Vermont Economy Project, which is a program that over the course of a couple of years is attempting to understand the capacities that are available within our communities to move forward with economic development and identify areas in which our capacities are lacking in that regard. And so that is gradually becoming a more active process. It's under new leadership now. There is a steering committee.
Now we're back in session. The next item on the agenda is a discussion regarding a charter review committee. I think you may have in the packet a form of application, and the purpose of that was to get to engender discussions so that we can get this process going, because this is not going to be something that's going to be finalized in a month, probably two, but we've got to get it through the process, because unlike the legislature, we've got timelines that decide when we have to have votes and that type of thing. So what would be when does this have to come out for consideration by the public, if there is a recommendation by this board to do so?
I think the commission should plan to finish its work no later than say the end of October, first week in November, if in fact they're going to be making a recommendation to this board for you to act upon and therefore place on the ballot for a charter amendment, because the statute requires at least 2 public hearings, one of which can be the floor meeting. That can be one, but the first hearing has to be at least, I think, 60 days before the vote. So once you receive the recommendation, you've got to act relatively quickly so that we can meet those deadlines if we're going to be having any kind of action in the March town meeting of 2018.
Also, in that context, right now, we don't have any kind of a sales tax, local sales tax option within our charter.
That's correct.
So that may be some part of what this board wants to consider for recommendation to the population next town meeting day. Not that that's necessarily the case, but that's the type of thing that we really have some time constraints on dealing with. So that application, I just roughed that out as to what I would envision with what we could have up to 9 members on this committee that we appoint. I think that's a little bit unwieldy. 9's kind of a big number. We should have I would think, a number that's not, it can be divided by 2.5, but not by 2, meaning like a 5 or 7 person committee to take that role on. And the thought was to offer this opportunity to every resident of legal voting age within the town of Bennington, because I think our charter is specific that charter review committee members have to be members of residents of Bennington. And then when we received the applications if we decided 7 was number 5 or 9, and then the majority will decide who's going to be on that committee. I don't think it's fair for us to just pull 5, 7, or 9 names out of the hat. If somebody is interested enough, we should go through that process just like we do with our commissions and committees to interview. Because I think that's the democratic way of doing it. The easy way would just be appoint, but I don't want the community to feel that it didn't have the opportunity or the individual to make their respective case to the board. Thoughts from my colleagues? Again,
I can't find the application.
It came email.
Oh, that's why I looked at it. Can I just look at this for a second? Go to somebody else. I had a question, but
okay. I'm going to someone else.
Yeah.
How would people apply? Would they turn in the Stewart?
Yes, that would. Normally, we would take all, much as we do for the boards and commissions appointments. Those applications come to us. We then turn them over to the board for when ultimately they discuss or interview those folks for the positions.
Is it going to be on the town website? Is that how you make that available?
We can do that, certainly.
Yeah.
Generally, or historically, what's happened is that people will send in their applications or interest to the select board at large, and it usually goes through
Yeah,
you.
that's another way to do it, is that select board, the general select board email is also, but we get those, they come to our office, so we can organize all of that information for you.
And historically with commissions and committees, we have not been overly concerned with form or otherwise. People can just send a note or otherwise. I do think that with this particular function, we really want to get a more broad response to why you're interested in those types of things. I don't want the application to be so overwhelming that they're saying, geez, if this is the application, do I want to get involved in the process? But so we can get an idea of why they're interested and what they might offer to that committee.
What you've proposed is not an overwhelming application.
No.
I mean, it's a few lines for 4 questions. And there, please tell us why you wish to serve on the Charter Review Committee. Have you given any thought to areas of the charter that you would like the committee to focus on? Can you keep an open mind and listen to others regarding any aspect of the charter? And number 4, can you give enough of your time so the committee can provide appropriate deliberation and make its recommendations to the select board within 6 months from appointment? So those are great questions, Tom.
It's pretty basic.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Yep, I have no problem with the questions, but I'm wondering if I were looking at those questions, I mean, we have a little bit more of intimate knowledge of what the charter is. Not everybody,
A good question, a good point, and I meant to follow up with, we should make at the same time point to where the charter can be accessed on our website.
right, and some, just general information, copies of the charter, and an estimate of what the time commitment will be.
I wouldn't even want to.
You would want to guess. I guess I'm concerned that people may think, oh yeah, I'd like to do this, and we may lose a couple along the way because the time commitment is just too onerous. So
I think we're going to have that discussion with the interviewees.
right, and think about that when we're
Yeah.
thinking of the number
Yeah.
of people
Yeah.
that we may want to allow for a few to not see the process through, possibly. Or guard against that.
Yeah, that's a good point. What do you think about the number? And I just,
Like 7.
I think 7 too. That was what I was thinking, 7.
Chad?
No, I think 7's a good number,
you think-
Not too big, not too small, odd number.
not divisible by 2.
What do we do if
Yeah.
one person leaves, then we're down to 6? That's not good.
How many
can have
people have shown
alternates.
interest amongst your peer groups? Have you guys ventured, kind of toss a line out to people to ask? And people are interested?
They are, yeah.
Because if you have a couple and Tom has a couple, and, I mean, we're going to be able to start to pick down to 7 if we're trying to
I
get to
think
7.
we'll have a good
which is
pool.
big difference.
I think we'll have a good
Yeah.
pool of strong applicants.
Yeah. I think particularly if they have access to the charter so they can start looking at that.
Yeah. As you look at the charter, we all have on different occasions, some sections would take 5 minutes. Some sections could take 2 months if you want to have a real discussion more than needed. But I think of the 9 or so sections, maybe 3 to 4 of them will have real meat in real time. But I don't want for us to go in with a preconceived idea of who we want on that committee, because I think that the citizens deserve the right to come and make their pitch. As much as I can, think of some folks that might be very good on that committee, but it's not something I want to go out and publish.
But there is a time, I mean, we're talking 4 months by the time the committee's 3 to 4 months.
It'll be compressed.
really. So it's compressed.
Yeah.
So you would need to be able to free up some time to devote to this, but it is just by the nature of meeting this timeline, short term.
It will be, yes. And I think if we can agree tonight that this application form or format is okay, I think we should use this as a kickoff to the announcement that we are taking applications for a charter review committee, with an eye perhaps to appointing those committee members the first meeting in June, so they can get going.
That's what I hope.
Wow. Yeah.
It's somewhat aggressive, but then again, folks have heard about this sitting in the background for a while, so it's time to move on it. And once that committee is established, it's going to make sort of its own internal direction of how they want to get things done. Because what we want to offer that committee are resources in the form of management expertise and lawyers, our town.
Dan and I have already made the commitment to work with the organization. We will also provide secretarial services so that they don't have to worry about finding someone to take the minutes. And we've preliminary talked with Rob a little bit about making himself available for those times when we need legal counsel to be able to come and speak with them. So we're gearing up for it. It's not a complex document, but if you're going to look at the authority of the manager and the authority of the select board and the downtown improvement district, and whether or not that, as formulated, is what we're doing today, those are the kinds of things that I think they'll look at. And then you have the local option tax issue, which the legislature will most likely never provide us the opportunity for, so we have to understand whether we want to try to provide it to ourselves.
Stuart, there are one or two, supplements or amendments? What are they called to the charter?
The charter document that you received is the most recent
Okay.
updated.
So it's everything people need to know will be in one document?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
I have some questions. Just to be clear about when we look at the charter review, is it going to be chapter and verse? You know, each part of the...
Good question. Because I think you have that same question I was like, if it comes back and the recommendation that here's what we want with the new charter from that committee. So we say to the population, here it is, vote it up or down. Or will it be in sections that we can present to them so that, one section stays the same, the other part changes or is amended, or with that local sales tax option, which will be new anyway. So I think that's probably a question that we should have, but probably don't really need it until it comes back with a recommendation, right?
Well, yeah, I would think, I think the board should have in mind what its charge will be when it begins to interview candidates, so that at least they take their seat with an idea of what you're looking for. I do think it's probably wise to have whatever amendments are proposed that you accept and place on the ballot to be, in a sense, a standalone amendment, so that some may rise, some may fall, rather than the whole thing be up or down, and you end up with either all or nothing. So, but those things, I think, once you get to the interview process, you really need to have, as a board, you need to have in your mind what you really expect these folks to do.
Secondly, you said, that you felt it was unlikely that we would get a local option tax from the legislature. But you said something new that I haven't heard, and that is that we could impose our own local
Through
tax.
The most recent towns that have adopted a local option tax or the rooms and meals tax, who were not considered gold towns, have all done it through charter amendments. And the legislature must approve the charter, but none of those have failed to date.
I see.
So because you put it in your charter, it gets voted as an amendment to the charter, so the public has spoken.
Right, and they're going to...
Now it's a matter for the legislature to accept what the people want or not.
Right, and just to be clear on this, if we decide to amend our charter, the legislature is not going to be going through it with a fine-tooth comb to see if they approve for this or that.
I think that they will. I think that Legislative Council will provide that oversight. There have been attempts by the League of Cities and Towns to make it a given that once the community has approved a charter amendment, that is then ratified by the legislature automatically. I'm on the board of the League of Cities and Towns. We have not been successful in convincing the legislature to essentially rubber stamp what communities ask for through their charters.
You have not?
Have not.
They don't believe in a home rule, basically.
That's right.
But in instances where you have been on, or where charter amendments have been made with respect to a local option tax, they have passed?
All have passed. I don't know if, in fact, of any charter amendment offered.
Well, that's really frustrating because we should have done this years ago.
Well, and I think when I raised that as a section, I don't want anyone in the community to think that it's a fait accompli, that either the recommendation or the board's decision, because to get to that decision, to get it to this, the lecture, I just don't want
to be premature,
yeah,
but
yeah.
That's something that we've talked about on several boards here. Yeah. We have the potential of $1 million a year coming into the coffers of the town of Bennington. Let's get it done.
I have a quick question. Can we be creative with that tax? And I know this may be a question for the committee. Like, can it be a local sales tax but not increase rooms and meals? Because I feel with the tourism piece, that would be a negative impact.
Yeah, and in fact, you can choose either or both. Generally, the law allows a community to adopt an increase of 1% rooms and meals tax and a 1% local option sales tax.
Okay.
You don't have to take them both.
Awesome, thank you.
And would this be would it be statutorily confined to just rooms and meals and/or one or the other? Or would that include large purchases like cars, refrigerators, things like that?
Well, if you adopt the local option sales tax, 1% addition, then it's on all purchases that are taxed by the state of Vermont. So if you're going to pay a 6% tax on your purchase,
so you're talking about Price Chopper, Hannaford's?
Right, but those things that are exempt, some food items are exempt. There are a lot of things that are exempt from sales tax in the purchase, but any sales tax you would add 1%. For those of us who do shop in Manchester from time to time, you're paying that 1% additional.
But as you said, there are some towns in the state that have not had rooms and meals. They've just had a sales tax on hard goods and that type of thing.
That's correct.
So, I mean, those are all discussion points. But I didn't mean to, I think I pushed this too far down the road too fast.
We digress.
Yes. That may not be something that the Charter Commission or committee deals with. It might be right here where it starts, because this is all new. And I think we should give that some thought as to whether or not we want to have that discussion.
And maybe one of the thoughts is that as we have that conversation, so suppose the Charter Committee did not consider an options tax and they came back without that recommendation, we would still want the flexibility to be able to do that, or to be able to consider it. So I think we're looking at a series of recommendations, and we probably would like to be able to pick and choose through them and amend them as we feel we need to, unless there's some really strong reason to use something as written, in which case we would ask the committee to.
Well, I think, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stu, these would be recommendations made by this committee, and it would ultimately be up to, well, one, the people of Bennington, but secondarily, the select board.
First, we get
the
us first,
stab.
and then it goes to the town, and then it goes to the state. So you can see how there's a lot of opportunity along the way. But again, I think you said I did digress and didn't mean to lead that discussion. I'm sorry for that, but it's it's out there. Folks, don't get concerned that we're going to have a local sales tax. So
10%.
Only hot dog stands.
We're only going to tax hot dogs, right?
And hamburger and macaroni and cheese. So can we try to do this so that we get the applications both posted and turned around, so that that first meeting would be about the 6th of June or so? I don't have my calendar.
I would hope that, I mean, if we were to normally announce an opening, we would then look at applications being received by the next meeting, which would be the end of May. So my goal, if we go forward from here, would be to try to bring those applications in before the May 22nd. Is that the next meeting? We're the 8th, 14th, yeah, 22nd. So that you can have those applications and perhaps then set a time in the conference room to do interviews and meet with those folks before the June meeting, wherein you might make those appointments.
Do you think that's enough time, folks?
It would be 2 weeks. It would be
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Get the word out, get the applications in.
Seems fast.
We can try.
How are you going to get the word out?
Yeah, it seems fast.
We're doing that tonight.
Pick up the phone and call your friends.
We'll post this on the website. We'll post this on the website. We'll do a press release for all of the local media folks to post and see where it goes. I mean, if we have 3 applications in 2 weeks, then obviously we won't be presenting those to you for interviews. But I would like to think there are more.
Let's try for that, and if it looks like we're not being fair, we'll extend it. But at the same time, we do want to have some closure at some point and depending upon the next meeting, how we're doing, we can go from there.
Yep.
Can we leave that topic? Okay, for now? Manager's report.
Very quickly, I think those of you who received the email, this was a Sunday email. This came to me late Friday. As you recall, we approved the purchase of a camera and body camera and vehicle camera system for the police department. The purchase was a lease purchase and does require the adoption of a resolution, which you had. It requires that the board chair sign the resolution, it basically says that the town of Bennington enters into a lease purchase agreement with Government Capital Corporation for the purpose of financing camera systems and related equipment. I won't go in through the rest of it. I would seek a motion authorizing the chair to sign the resolution, waive the reading thereof, and let us move forward with this purchase.
Stuart, it's strictly perfunctory. There's nothing that's changed about the rest of it.
No, exactly what we presented to you at budget time.
Okay. I'd make a motion.
So moved.
For the second.
Is I think
Good.
we made.
And discussion, Chad or Carson, basically this came up through the budget. It was the determination that we'd like to do it, but at that particular point in time, we didn't have the, I think the finances were...
It was a $96,000 purchase.
Yeah.
By financing it over 3 years, the total cost is just over $100,000, but it brings it within our budget constraints at the time.
And this was basically presented to us by Chief Doucette during his budget presentation. Other questions or other part of the discussion, or I'm ready to move on?
Just a comment.
Yep.
It, you know, in the current state of affairs around the country, it's unfortunate that we have to, in essence, cover our backsides because, you know, our police force has been pretty exemplary.
Well, I think so too, but I think this covers the backsides of all interactions,
Citizens.
both sides of the interaction. I mean, that's the beauty of a camera system. It protects those we deal with as well as the officers who are dealing with them.
And we also heard that this is probably going to become a mandatory.
It will most likely become mandatory.
Yeah. Okay. All in favor of the resolution as presented, circulated? Aye? Aye. 7 in favor. Again, there's no one opposed to it. Stuart?
Thank you. I'll have you sign that before we leave, Tom.
Okay, yep.
The boards and commissions appointments are coming up. You should have received in your packet a complete listing of the openings and those who have applied. Those who are incumbents were highlighted, and we also have a new applicant that was not, I guess it was in the packet, but Sharon Brush has stepped forward to apply for the Housing Authority Board. So we have 3 positions, applications for the Housing Authority Board. There are 4 positions opening. As you know, the board is a 5-member board, and they haven't been able to operate since they dropped below 3. So I think it's important that we look to fill those positions as quickly as possible. My recommendation to the board would be that we not interview all of the incumbents who seek reappointment. You have their resumes and applications, but that we do interview folks for the Housing Authority Board. 2 are new, 1 is an incumbent, and we still have openings on the Regional Commission. We do not fill the Town Service Officer position any longer because the Agency of Human Services handles those questions and concerns for people who are normally in need of the Town Service Officer assistance. So that would be my recommendation. I would look for you folks to, if you agree with me, I would love to set a date, perhaps sometime middle of next week, where we could conduct those interviews for the Housing Authority Board so we can move quickly to fill those positions and then simply appoint the remainder perhaps at the end of that meeting. If that is
It's usually about a 20-minute chat with...
We generally set them up at 15 to 20 minutes per.
Does that work for everybody?
It does. Can we just say that the Housing Authority, that can be anyone in Bennington County?
That can be
That is
anyone.
not a
And
Bennington
believe,
specific.
I think the applicant, one of our applicants is from outside Bennington County, as a matter of
Great.
fact.
It's outside of Bennington County?
Bennington County or Bennington?
Outside Bennington County.
Oh, you can.
Oh, okay.
Fine with me. Why don't you just share a date? Usually is it like a 5 o'clock type of thing? or-
Yeah, if let's see, well, does next Monday, the 15th? No?
I got a governance meeting at the hospital. I got a conflict.
How about Tuesday or Wednesday? 5:30 at the town office conference room.
Wednesday?
Wednesday?
MAU.
What's Wednesday?
Pardon?
MAU night.
It's what? It's what night?
MAU meeting is the 17th.
Croquet begins on Tuesday,
What time?
Excuse me.
At what time?
6 to 8.
I'm at the
All right, I can skip croquet.
MAU, it doesn't start till 7.
Okay.
What a
17th is
what a
fine.
diverse group of people we have.
We have lives, Stu, we have lives.
Why don't you just suggest 2 or 3 days and the majority,
Okay.
the majority shows up?
We'll do that. All right.
Yeah, because these are not.
Just need a quorum.
Update on,
Yes, just a brief update on the PFOA for those of you who hadn't heard last week, I believe it was, and time is failing me these days. The state of Vermont came to Bennington to make a presentation on where they are with St. Gobain in their negotiations. I can tell you that St. Gobain and the state of Vermont disagree on whether or not St. Gobain is the sole responsible party for the PFOA contamination west of the railroad right-of-way. East of the railroad right-of-way. But at least they are close to an agreement on everything west of that railroad right-of-way, which would be the village of North Bennington, the folks on Vale Road, Austin Hill, Murphy Road. So we don't have an agreement yet, but the state made that announcement at the meeting at the Bennington College. We're hoping to hear soon whether or not those negotiations are successful, and at least it's a partial settlement. It gets construction underway in 2017, which has been the state's goal, in a sense, it's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it, at this point, does not appear to be a freight train.
Is the design?
The design will be finished. I think they're hoping for complete design approval sometime June. I saw an approval come through today from the State Water Quality folks that has accepted the 20% design, which gets us then to move forward into the, I'm not sure what percent they look for next, but we're moving. And I just wanted people to know that.
okay, is there anything else? Let's do.
That's all I've got.
Other business, Jean?
Oh, wow, that was quick. I just want to make sure that people were aware and saw the article in the banner. I'm going to read 2 small excerpts from it. It has the headline was Bennington third in the National Arts Vibrancy Index. That local color and character has been recognized for the second time by the National Center for Arts Research, ranking 3rd in a national list of the top arts vibrant small communities. And another small excerpt is, the most recent Arts Vibrancy Index is the 3rd annual ranking conducted by the National Center for Arts Research, an extension of Southern Methodist University in Texas. The index includes every region of the country and aims to recognize arts vibrancy in all of its innumerable iterations. And this is in quotes, in the current climate, it is more important than ever to recognize the vital role that the arts play in creating dynamic places to live, work, and visit, said Dr. Zanny Gerard Voss. Excuse me if I didn't say your name right. She's the director of NCAR. The index helps us understand what factors contribute to making an urban area artistically vibrant and culturally rich, and illustrates how vibrancy manifests in a wide variety of forms that are often tied to that community's unique identity. This was just another piece of wonderful news that I don't think any of us really expected, and it's just one more thing that we should all celebrate.
Great. Carlson? Great. Pedestrian cross marking on, across from the Welcome Center. It's been knocked down or taken down. It's not there anymore. Do you know what happened to it?
From the Welcome Center. I mean, from the chamber?
Downtown Welcome Center.
You see it?
Right there, Elm Street and South Street.
I'll have to
It
find
wasn't
out.
there. It was, it was there, and then it's not there. I'm just wondering if it, a semi took it out and just kept on going. But the only thing is, I'd rather see that taken out than some little old lady or chairperson of the select board.
Generally, they take a licking and
They do.
keep on ticking, so
Yeah.
I'll find out what happened to it.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Quick thanks to all the people, the volunteers that did such a great job on Green Up Day. It was wonderful seeing those bags and bags and bags and bags and bags of garbage, and people taking pride in their community. It was great. And quick reminder also that the Bennington Farmers Market has moved outside for the season, so it is now summer officially, and we'll be at the Riverwalk Park every Saturday from now through October.
What time does it?
At 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock.
I just wanted to bring one thing to people's attention. Coming up, I think it's Friday, May 19th, there's the Cedar Grove, New Jersey, 45 students and chaperones, joint musical with the Mount Anthony Music Department. They'll be putting on a concert by Lynn Sweet. It's a partnership every other year where Mount Anthony students go to New Jersey last year and then perform. A couple weeks ago, I had students go down to practice. They went to New Jersey to practice, and now these students are coming here on this Friday night, and they're doing music of the Beatles. So if you're a fan of the Beatles, it's Friday night, 7 p.m. on the 19th. So really great event. If you've ever gone to anything that Lynn Sweet does, it's always amazing. And the students really work hard and excellent work, really showcase their talent. So tickets can be bought at the high school or at the door.
That's great, Chadwick.
Tom, may I take a minute, actually?
Sure.
Sorry,
No,
I skipped over myself, but I did want to take a second to just thank the individuals involved with the Bennington Area Trail System event that happened this past Saturday at Southern Vermont College. There was a lot of hard work completed by students, volunteers, and that trail system, a large portion of it is on Mount Anthony, but there are some great trails around the Bennington area. So I would just welcome you to visit their website. You can Google Bennington Area Trail System. You can find it there. Their acronym is BATS. Many of us in this room were in attendance, but there were another probably close to 100 individuals that were there throughout the day. So I just want to applaud their efforts and thank them for all the hard work, volunteering, and keeping that trail system great.
And Southern Vermont College, who really put out for it. The college and the students put a tremendous amount into that.
There's a lot of people that are involved in that, so hats off to all of them.
There's a lot of things happening. The new parking lot at North Branch Street, is that open and ready to go now?
It's open and ready, we need to pave the driveway, but that's just the way, the plan is open now, so it should be paved. So when it's open.
Maybe we should have it like a ribbon cutting or something.
Community hike.
Well, the Green Mountain Club will be coming down probably in June, to cut a new trail ahead and put it through.
Maybe we can coordinate
Let's do something with them.
Yeah,
Thank
could
them for their
recognize for that, because, that's someone mentioned there were like 10, 12 cars there off the road. It's a great asset that we have right there in our backyard. And as far as marketing, all of these things that we just talked about are marketing. You have to get out in the world, and with social media and other ways that it can be done, there's a lot of good happening here. So we don't all have to think about old and decrepit, like select board chairs. Anyway, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, we're out early. Thank you. We're adjourned.